Begin today the Gemara on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, the last line on the Amud. It said in the Mishnah, "Va'ashemen shelahem," that they were geyser on the oil from Goyim that it should be usher to consume. Okay, so now the Gemara here brings in the Mishnah, according to one Gersa, it said in the Mishnah that later Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but it's really, as we'll see in the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya that was mevatel this gzeira. So what's the source of this gzeira of the oil? Shemen, so regarding the oil, Rav says, Daniel Gazer Olav. Daniel is the one that decreed not to eat from their oil. So it's a very early gzeira, from the times of Daniel. Now the reason for this gzeira, this is already the Gemara explained before, and the same applies to the oil, is Mishum Chasnus, in order not to mingle with Goyim and to come to intermarry. Shmuel Omar, however, Shmuel says that it's nothing to do with that. It's not because of Chasnus, but it's Zlivosan Shalkelim Tmeim Oizrasan. It's because of Zlivosan, which could mean the dripping or the absorption of the Kelim Tmeim that the Goyim use to store their oils in it, that will aster their oil. It would seem the simple pshat of here, what the Gemara is saying is that it refers to the barrels that they're storing their oil in, and since their oil is tamei, so if a yid puts his oil into that barrel, it'll become tamei. But the Mefarshim point out it's hard to say that because nothing becomes tamei because of what was absorbed in the walls. You can say a isser happens by what was absorbed in walls, but not tumah. So when the Gemara says livasam, it means that when they store their oil, so they have this dripping from their oil, which will be metame, or the barrel itself is actually tamei. And the barrel is tamei, so then your oil that you put into their barrels becomes a tamei, or if you're going to use their oil, that is. Keep it simple. If you're using their oil, their barrels are tamei, so their oil is tamei as well. That's the pshat that Shmuel said.
The oil that's inside.
Right. So this leaf, does not. It means that their oil that dripped on the barrel is tamei, so it makes the barrel tamei, and then the oil inside, all their oil becomes tamei, whatever they store in it. So the Gemara asks, how could you say this is the reason? Does everybody keep this? Is there an obligation to keep this? That when you eat any food, it has to be done dafke b'tara, and you can't become tamei. When you eat trumeh or things like that, then you have to be toher. But when you eat chulin, you don't have to necessarily eat betara. There is a concept of oichlin chulin betara, which the Gemara brings in many places, which is, according to most opinions, just a midas chassidus. It's not an obligation at all. So how can we say that they would aser oil for this reason? Ella, so the Gemara says, zlivasan shalkelim asurin aisrasan. The issue with the oil of the Goyim is that they're storing it in their barrels that were used for forbidden things, and therefore the absorption of forbidden things in the walls of the barrel here, lifasa means literally it's the absorption that there is in the walls of their barrels that they're storing their oil in, which is asadiga oil, and that comes from forbidden fats, and therefore that comes out into their oil and asters it. Amalei Shmuel Rav, so Shmuel tells Rav, Bishlai milididi. According to my opinion, it's understood that I said zlifas and shalkelim asurin aisrasam, that it's because of this that the oil of the goyim is stored in their barrels, and therefore there's from the asr oil in the walls that makes it asr. So hainu, this is why the asr of Yitzchak Bashmuel B'Marta, that when Yitzchak Bashmuel B'Marta came from Eretz Yisrael, he came to Bavel V'Amar, and he said that Darish Rab Simloi ben Nitzivin, that Rabbi Simloi and Nitzivin darshaned and taught that shemen, when it comes to this issur of eating the shemen from Goyim, Rabbi Yehuda ubeis dinoi nimnu olav v'tiru. That Rabbi Yehuda, and this is Rabbi Yehuda, some area Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but as mentioned, it wasn't Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it was Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, which was a grandson. So he came and he brought a bezdin, and they took account, and they were matter this issur of eating the oil. So what's the reason? Why did Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya decide that it should be mutter? Didn't we just give a good reason that it's the absorption of the isser, which is in the walls of their barrels, that's asering their oil? So why was he matter it? So Shmuel says, according to my opinion, this is simple. We could explain this. Because Kasava, Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya held that Naisin Tam Lepagam mutter. When you have something that gives a taste, even something that's asr that gives a taste, but it's a Tam Lepagam, it gives a bad flavor. It doesn't give a good flavor. It's something that's there already for a while, and therefore it loses its good flavor. So that's something that, because it's a bad flavor, it's going to be mutter. This is actually something that which will be discussed later in the Masechta Barichas. It's a big machlokes whether noisim tam of gam is aser or mutter. So what Shmuel is saying is that earlier in the earlier generations when they asked this, it's because they followed the opinion that noisim tam of gam is aser. And then Rabbi Yehuda and Nesiya came and took account in the Bezdin, and they passed no, that if it's an Isser that has a bad flavor, so then it does not cause any Isser. So we understand why they were mad to this. However, but according to you, according to Rav, the Amrit that you say, the Nil Gazar Olav, the Nil is the one that made this decree not to eat from their oil, and the reason is because of Chasnos, nothing to do with this Isser. So the Nil Gazar, the Nil makes a decree, and Rabbi Yehuda and Hanasir, he's able to come and nullify this decree. How does he have the power to do this? But Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Ein Bezdin Yochel Levatel Divrei Bezdin Chaveiroi. One court, a bezdin, cannot come and nullify a decree from a previous bezdin. Ella imkein godlei menu b'chachmo b'minyan. Only if the later bezdin is greater in its wisdom, which means that at least the deresh of the bezdin has to be in a greater level of his wisdom, and ub'minyan, and in their count, which either means that they have to be in their age older or in their numbers. They have to be a larger bezdin to be mevatel a previous bezdin. So Gemara says that you can't say that regarding Daniel. You can't say that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya with his bezdin was greater in chachma or in B'minyan. Definitely b'chachma they weren't greater than Daniel. So how were they later mevatel this gzeira of Daniel? So Hamalei, so Rav says to Shmuel, Simloi luda kamrit. You're asking me a question from what was taught in the name of Simloi, which was in Eretz Yisrael, in the city of Lud. Shani ludoi the mizalzelo. The people of Lud, you can't rely on them. They're mizalzel. They're not careful with the surim that is an established isser, and they were matter this even though they really had no ability and no source to be able to be matter this. That's what he said about Reb Simloi. Amalei, so Shmuel says to Rav again. No, but who's the one that taught it though? So Reb Simloi was the one that darshaned this. He's the one that darshaned that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya was mevatel it. So therefore.
Daniel was just one man in like the...
No, but it must have been with his bezdin. It was Daniel in his time with his bezdin made a gzeira. Yeah. So Amalei, so Shmuel here's what Rav said about Reb Simloi, that he comes from Lud and he's mizalzel. Eshlachlei, should I send to Reb Simloi to tell him how you expressed yourself about it? So Ichsif, Rav got embarrassed by this that he said that he wouldn't want that this should be shared with Reb Simloi, what he said about him. Okay, but what you see over here is Rav refused to accept this heter. Rav really held that the isser of eating from oil still remained, and you still have to be noig isser. Okay, so the point there is not only to try to figure out why is it mutter. Rav actually held that you should still keep the isser. That's what you see over here. Now Amar Rav, now Rav explained that. So what taka happened over here? Imheim loy darshu. So it must be that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya, he was matter this isser because he didn't see any source for this isser that it comes from Daniel. So Rav says, even if they didn't darshan this, and therefore they will matter this isser of the oil, but anan loy darshinon, should we not darshan from what we could see in the pasuk that this actually comes from Daniel? Where do we see in Daniel? Because Vaksiv, the pasuk says as follows: Vayasam Daniel aliboy. Daniel put on it to his heart. He took to heart the following: Ashaloi yizgal v'pas baga melech. He should not defile himself. He shouldn't dirty himself with the food from the melech, which is where he was over there by Nebuchadnezzar. And also ubiyayin mishtov, that he shouldn't drink from his wine, mishtov, from his drinks. So it uses the term mishtov, which is lashon rabim. What's the plural term? Mishtov is a kasav medaber. The lashon rabim is because it's speaking about two different things that you could be drinking. Echad mishta yayin, that he won't drink wine from them, and vechad mishta shemen, and also not to drink oil from Nebuchadnezzar. So therefore, this is the source where you see that the Nil was already misaken this, that you shouldn't drink the oil from Goyim. So the Gemara explains, Rav Savar Ali Baisam, that it says there in the pasuk that Daniel took this to heart, Olochol Yisrael Hoira, and that he taught this, he made this exeter for all the Klal Yisrael as well. But Shmuel Savar, however, Shmuel knows of this pasuk as well. But Shmuel held Ali Baisam. This was something personal that Daniel went to this extent for himself. But Olochol Yisrael Hoira, but he didn't make this exeter. He didn't teach this for the rest of Klal Yisrael. This is the source of Shmuel, of Rav, that is.
That would be a good svara. However, we see that the reason Daniel gives is because of Hasanas. So he is talking to Klal Yisrael. He's not talking about
Well,
himself.
if that's according to Rav, he doesn't say it clearly in the pasuk. According to Rav, that he was made of this, and the entire Klal Yisrael, the Yisrael is chasnas. But according to Shmuel, it was his personal thing. He wasn't made of this to the whole Klal Yisrael. Okay, well now the Gemara asks him this, even according to Rav himself. V'shemen, Daniel Gazer. Does Rav hold that oil, the source of this Gzeda comes from Daniel? V'ha'omar Bali, which is the name of a Chacham. And he said, then the name of Avimi Nusa, or maybe this is one long name. Others are going to say Amar Avimi. No, he said in the name of Avimi Nusa, Mishmei de Rav. From who it came from Rav himself, that he said, Piton, Vishamnon, Yenon, Ubnei Seyan, the bread of Goyim, their oil, their wine, and their daughters. These are all part of the 18 different Gzeiros that Chazal made that are brought in the first Perek of Masechta Shabbos. And these are Gzeiros that Chazal made in that time, that Shammai and Hillel made in that time. These are Gzeiros that the Gemara there says you cannot uproot them, and the Gemara will discuss this. And one of them that's mentioned here is Bnei Seyan, their daughters. The Gemara is soon going to discuss what this means. Seemingly that their daughters is Asam and Atayra. But the point is, we clearly see over here that this was Gzeiros, Shamnon, the oil was a Gzeiros that was made in the time that the Gemara says Shammai and Hillel made it, not from the time of Daniel. Now the Gemara says, if you'll argue and say, Asa Daniel Gazar, that Daniel was the first one that made this Gzeira on the oil, but V'lei Kibbel. The Yidden didn't accept it then. And then also Talmidah, the Hill, V'Shamai, the Gazar, and then the Talmidim of Hill and Shammai came and they decreed this again and the Kibbel. And that's when the Gzeira got accepted in Klal Yisrael. But if that's the case though, Im Kain, Mai Asaduse de Rav. So if so, what is this testimony that Rav said that it comes from the time of Daniel, and therefore this is a Gzeira from Daniel, which you can't be mevatel, as you see before in the Gemara, that the Gemara asked on Rav that if it comes from the times of Daniel, you can't be mevatel this, and Rav did not want to be mevatel this Gzeira. But if it comes from the time of Daniel, it comes from Hillel and Shammai. So then from Hillel and Shammai, it doesn't apply what we said before. What did Rav say before? Rav said before that the reason why Yehuda Nesiah was able to be mevatel Gzeira, he didn't know of the drasha from the pasuk. He didn't realize that this is how you're supposed to learn the pasuk. But Rav says we know the emes that this is how you're supposed to learn the pshat in the pasuk. But now even Rav himself holds that after Daniel, Hillel and Shammai were the ones that made the Gzeiros, or their Talmidim. So then how would Rav explain how Yehuda Nesiah came and was mevatel this? Yehuda Nesiah definitely knew that Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah definitely knew that Hillel and Shammai made this Gzeira, so they can't be mevatel because they're not greater. They're not a greater bezdin than them.
That before?
Again?
Hillel Shammai was before?
Yeah, Talmid Hillel Shammai was before
Yehuda
Nesiah. Yeah,
Daniel.
Rabbi Yehuda Nesiah. But Daniel is from the end of the Nevi'im.
Wasn't that the beginning of the Anshe Knesset HaGadolim?
Daniel, yeah.
So
yeah,
that's
correct.
official Bestin then.
Yeah, correct. Ella says the Gemara, Daniel, so we have to say that according to Rav, what happened was, Daniel Gazar Olav Be'ir. Daniel made the Gzeira when you're in the city, living amongst people, and as Rashi is, here's where Rashi says that the reason for the Gzeira was chasnas, not to mingle and intermarry. And then V'aseinu, the Talmidim of Hillel and Shammai, strengthened the Gzeira. V'gazar Philip Besada. They said you shouldn't eat from their oil wherever you are, even if you're not in the city. That's a pshat in this inyan. Okay, but now the Gemara asks the question, but if this is the case, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Heichi Matzil Mishra Takante the Talmidei Shammai V'Hillel. The question still remains though, if Talmidei Hillel V'Shammai came later and they were machazik the Gzeira, they reinforced it and they added that even when you're out in the field, wherever you are, you should not eat from their oil. So how then did Rabbi Yehuda Nasi come later and was mevatel this Gzeira? As we quoted before, you can't be mevatel gzeira unless you're a bezdin that's greater in wisdom and in number. Another point here is, based on what Rav said before, that the oil was part of the 18 things that they were geyser in that time period. That you could always uproot a takana from a previous bezdin with the condition that we mentioned before, but chutz mishmayna sadavar, besides these 18 things that they were geyser in that time period, shafila yave eliyo ubezdinoi, even if Eliyahu Navi himself and his bezdin will come, ein shaim eloi. We will not listen to him and we will not uproot this gzeira. So if so, regarding the oil, which was part of these 18 things that they were geyser, why did they not uproot this? How did Rabbi Yehuda Nesiya have the power, that is, to uproot this? Rav Misharshi answers, there's another klal regarding this concept. Matam, what's the reason? What's the reason why these 18 things were so unique that they said that no Bezdin later can come and uproot it? Because these 18 things, we know that this is a takana, this is a issa that spread throughout Klal Yisrael and everybody accepted it and fulfilled it. So then you can't uproot it, even with a Bezdin that's greater. However, Shemen le poshet isure b'Rav Yisrael. When it comes to oil, though, this is a gzeira, even though it was part of those 18 things, but it's still not included in this unique status of these 18 things because it's a issa that it did not spread throughout Klal Yisrael. Our sages, they sat and they inspected this matter. Al Shema, regarding the oil, they saw that this is not a issa that spread throughout Klal Yisrael. Apparently, in that time period, as it mentions in Mefarshim, they did not have oil available for them in all the places where they were. We're talking about olive oil that they used primarily. So they imported olive oil from other places where Goyim were living. That's the only thing they had available. So therefore, this gzeira never took hold. And the Samcha Rabbi Seinu al Divrei Rab Shimon Gamliel al Divrei Rab Elazar bar Tzaddik, they relied on what both Rab Shimon Gamliel and Rab Elazar bar Tzaddik said, that Shayoimrim ein geizering gzeira al tzibur. You can't decree any decree on the tzibur ela amkein roiv tzibur yochel lamid ba, unless the tzibur is able to accept it. If they're not, then the gzeira does not take hold. So what you see over here is the Gemara is saying an additional point. It's not the pshat that originally the gzeira took effect and they kept it, and then they became lax and they stopped keeping it because it was too hard. It's a gzeira that the tzibur did not yichayil lam, but never took effect, meaning the people never really kept this. Okay.
With pas, that was the thing, but with shemen.
With shemen. No, pas, the Gemara said before, is there's room to be makel. They never uprooted the gzeira, but there's room to be makel. The Gemara said before, b'shas atchak. But regarding shemen, here it's saying that they never kept the gzeira. But the truth is, another point has to be clarified, even though they never kept the gzeira, it doesn't mean the gzeira is batel memela. It means that now a later Bezdin has the ability to uproot it. That's what it means. Okay. Now the Amar of Ada Bar Ave said, "Micro, where's the pasuk for this concept that if this is a gzeira that was never accepted by Klal Yisrael, then you're able to uproot it? Because the pasuk says as follows: B'me'era atem ne'arim, that you accept upon yourself something as a gzeira, like a curse, meaning that you must fulfill this. That's what the term of here. It's a curse, meaning that it's like a new isra that you didn't establish with a bezdin. But then the pasuk goes on to say, "Va'isi atem kaivim." Then Hashem says, "But you steal from me," meaning that you're not fulfilling that gzeira. Hagai kuloi, the entire nation. So the pasuk concludes the entire nation. What does this mean? If this is a gzeira that the entire nation, all the Yidden accept, so then the pasuk is saying that you must fulfill it, and if not, it's like you're stealing from Hashem. But if it's not a gzeira that spread throughout Klal Yisrael, so then this is a kind of gzeira that doesn't have the same koyach. It's still in effect gzeira, but it doesn't have the same koyach, and a later bezdin is able to uproot it. And that's what happened with the oil. So you see over here from the conclusion of the Gemara that even if Daniel, going back to the original question the Gemara asked on Rav, even if Daniel was the one that instituted this gzeira, it would be possible to uproot it in a later generation, even if they're not a bezdin that's as smart and as great as him, because of the fact that it did not spread throughout Klal Yisrael. But Rav could have gave this answer in the beginning. When Shmuel asks him, so why it was the gzeira uprooted? But Rav did not want to accept this. Apparently Rav said he doesn't know what he's talking about, because Rav held that the gzeira should remain still in effect. And then if you look in the Yerushalmi, the Mefarshim may bring, the Yerushalmi goes on to say the continuation of the story, the discussion between Rav and Shmuel. Rav refused to accept this heter of the oil, and then Shmuel told him, no, Chacham will matter it, and don't be machmer regarding the oil, and Rav forced Shmuel, forced Rav to use Shem and Akum, so that he shouldn't be machmer more than what Chachamim themselves decided and established that they uprooted this gzeira. And from here you learn that when it's something like this, that Chachamim uproot the gzeira, you can't be frummer than what Chazal themselves established that it's mutter, and that's what you learn here from the conclusion of the story. Okay, Gufa, now going back to this statement itself that was mentioned before, Omar Bali, Omar Avimi Nusa Mishmei Derav, that from those 18 things that they decreed, Piton, Vishamnon, Yenan, Ubniseyan, the bread, the oil, and the wine, and their daughters, Kulan mishmayna sadavarhe. These are from the 18 things that they were geyser. So the question is, b'nei seyem mayi. What is this gzeire about the daughters? That's awesome in Atayra. So the Gemara brings two pshatim. Amar Rav Nachman b'Yitzchak. Rav Nachman b'Yitzchak says, Gazru al b'nei seyem nidois ma'arisaysan. They were geyser on the goyish daughters that from their birth, when they're in their cribs, they are tomei like a nida. Even though minatayra, the concept of nida does not apply by a goy b'chlal, but nevertheless, they were geyser this gzeire for the goyish girls in order to stay away from them, not to come into any physical contact with them, to not to get too close. That's the pshat. Another pshat, the Gemara says, Genive mishmei de Rav amar. Genive said in the name of Rav, that's not what it means. And he said as follows: Why did Rav say all these things together? Piton, Shamdan, Yenan, Ubnesayan. So the pshat is like this: Kulan mishum avodas chavim gazr behen. It's all gzeiris in order not to come to serve Avoda Zara. So he said as follows: Gazru al piton, the gzeira not to eat from their bread was mishum shamnan, not to come to eat from their oil. Okay, but now the Gemara clarifies this point here. My olme de shema mipas. Why is it worse to eat from their oil than eating from their bread? That you're saying that the gzeira not to eat bread is in order not to come to eat from their oil. So the Gemara says no. Ella, the way we understand to say this is as follows: They were geyser al piton vishamnan. They were geyser not to eat from their bread and oil mishum yenon, in order not to then come to share and eat from their wine. Correct. And then what's the wine? What's the issue with the wine? Because val yenon, because if you drink wine and you get intoxicated, mishum b'nei seyen. Then you come to mingle and have a connection to their girls. And val b'nei seyen, what was the gzeira of the girls? Mishum davar acher. Not only before it mentioned chasnos, here it's saying that the gzeira was that from that you're going to come to serve Avoda Zara. Right? You're going to marry them, then you're going to come to serve Avoda Zara. Okay, now here in the Gemara you see, okay, let me just conclude the one more thing that he said, Val davar acher, there was something else that they were geyser on, which the Gemara is soon going to clarify what that is. Mishum davar acher. For another matter, not related to Avoda Zara. Okay, which Gemara will soon clarify this. But just to stop at this point here, this is an interesting thing that all the Rishonim speak about this and the Poskim speak about this, that here in the Gemara it's saying that the Isser of wine is Mishum b'nei seyen, in order not to intermarry or to come then to Avoda Zara. But before the Gemara, from the beginning of the Perek, the whole thing about Stam Yenim of Goyim was because of the issue of the Chashad of Yain Nesach, that maybe they pour it to Avoda Zara. So how do we reconcile this what was the Gzeira of Yain? So there's a machlekes about this. Some Rishonim say that the Iker Gzeira was because of Yain Nesach. But there was a time that the Gzeira was only Mishum b'nei seyen, but then they made a stronger Gzeira, and that it's not only Mishum b'nei seyen, it's because of Yain Nesach. That's really the Iker Gzeira. Others say no, it's the other way around. The Iker Gzeira is Mishum b'nei seyen, not to come and intermarry with them. Elamai, they found the smach minatera also mitzad the chshash of yayin nesach, but that alone wouldn't have been enough of a reason to make a gzeira, because the chshad of a guy using his wine to pour for Avoda Zara is a minority. It's not that the guy usually has his wine, he drinks his wine, but they were simchet to the inyan of yayin nesach, but the ikik gzeira is what it says here, which is b'nei seyen. That's another opinion of Shainim. Okay, so the Gemara now asks, and what it says here, so according to what it's saying here, so this was the gzeira that they made not to eat their bread, their oil, in order not to drink from their wine, in order not, then they were also geyser, not to marry their daughters, in order not to come to serve Avoda Zara. So according to this pshat, which was Gniva, this is the way he explained the name of Rav, it comes out that when it says B'nai Seyem, what does B'nai Seyem mean? Literally, that the Chachamim are the ones that were geyser not to marry their daughters. So the Gemara now asks, according to this pshat, B'nai Seyem, how could you say that their daughters, the Chachamim made Gzeira, Deiraisi, that's Asam in Atayra. Dichsev lo tischaten bam. The pasuk says not to marry their daughters. So how could you say this is Gzeira from the Chachamim? So lo tischaten bam, according to Tosfos, he says that the Gemara really means a continuation of the pasuk, where it says Lesikach ubito lesikach lebincha. According to Tosfos, lo tischaten bam refers only to the Zion Umais in Eretz Yisrael. Only the continuation. Oh, sorry, it refers to like the Schattenbaum is the Zayin Umas after their Megayah. That's what the Schattenbaum means. Even after their Megayah, it's also to marry from those 7 nations. It's a continuation of the pasuk Ubito lesikach lebincha, which refers to the Goyim before their Megayah. Okay, so now the Gemara says,
Once they're a guy, they still be an Isser.
Yeah, that's Taisus' Shitta. That there's an Isser Min HaTorah. There's a machlekes Yishayim about it, but that's Taisus'
Who are
Shitta.
they
Yeah.
supposed to marry with? Some other one that was in a guy?
If they're Megayer, it's a problem. Yeah, only amongst them.
And it's for all generations.
Yeah. Okay, so the Gemara says that Zayin Umais, this pasuk of Leitis Chatein, refers only to the 7 nations in Eretz Yisrael. Al Vashari the Kechavim Loi. But for other Goyim, this lav of Leitis Chatein and the continuation of the pasuk does not apply to them. And Va'aseinu, and the Chachamim came, and the Gazer, and they were Gezer Afila the Shar of the Kechavim, that the Isser of Leitis Chatein applies to all Goyim. Right, which means that Min HaTorah, to marry a guy, there's no Isser. It doesn't say in the Torah anywhere that one may not marry a guy. It's only regarding the Zayin Umais. Now the Chachamim came and added and said that you shouldn't marry a guy because then you'll come to serve Avoda Zara. But the Gemara asks, but Rab Shimon ben Yechi Dama. Rab Shimon ben Yechi said, Ki Yaseh bincha me'acharei. The pasuk says, why not marry a guy? Because then your child will come and go away from me and will serve Avoda Zara, and therefore this means l'rabes kol ha'mesiras. You shouldn't marry any guy. Because any guy you marry that serves Avoda Zara will bring your children that are born to follow Avoda Zara. So that means that it's not only the Zayin Umais. So Ma'ikala Meimar, what are we going to say? This is the famous that it's always brought that Rab Shimon is Darish time in the crop. He dashens and explains that the Isser is based on the reason that the pasuk says. So if so, this pasuk Ki Yasser es Bincha is actually extra because we anyways would darshan time of the cross. So then when it adds Ki Yasser es Bincha, it's coming to clarify that it includes all nations. So therefore the Gemara says something else. Ella the Iraise Ishus Derech Chasnus. Min HaTorah, the Isser is to marry a guy. That's what it means, like this Chatan, when you're getting properly married to them. Vaseinu, and then the Chachamim came and they were Gazer Afila Derech Znus. They were Gazer not to have a relation with a guy that it's a Isser Min HaTorah, even if it's Derech Znus, without marriage. Fragt the Gemara, Znus Nami, Bebeis Dina Shel Shem Gazru. Znus, we see already from the Bezin of Shem, in the story in the Torah with Yehuda and Tamar, that there was a Gzeire for a relation with a guy, Derech Znus. Why? Because the Chsiv, the Pasuk says, when Tamar, when she was being accused of, they saw that she's pregnant, and they accused her of having a relation with a guy. They didn't, before they knew that this was from Yehuda, and what does it say? Vayemer Yehuda Hitziyua V'tisareif. That they're going to give her a chiyuv of sreifa because of her relation with a guy. So, and over there, it wasn't derech chasnus, it was derech znus, and we see that it's aser. So Ella, the Gemara goes says something else. Ella will have to say like this: the iraise oy v'kechav mabal bas Yisrael. Min HaTorah, as you see here in the story by Yehuda and Tamar, if it's a guy that marries a Bas Yisrael, Tamar was a Bas Yisrael and she was accused of having a relation with a guy, so that's when it's going to be also. Why? Because the Mashcha Basrei, the wife will follow the husband, and then the children will be over the Zara. Al Yisrael Abala Vedas Kachavim, but if it's the reverse, if it's a Yid that marries a Goyish woman, lie. Then in the Torah you don't see that there's a Isser for this. Here, sorry, we're not even talking about marriage here. We're talking about Znus. There's no Isser. And also when the Chacham came in Gazer, Afil Yisrael, Habal Vedas Kachavim, that even a Yid that marries a Goyish woman or has even Znus, even any relation with a Goyish woman is also Asr. That was the Gzeira that Chachamim added. But the Gemara asks on this as well. Yisrael Abal Vedas Kachavim, a Yid that has a relation with a Goyish woman, even B'derech Znus, Halacha l'Moshe Misinai. There's Halacha l'Moshe Misinai that this is Aser. Because the Amar, the master has said, regarding the story that happened in by Pinchas, right, in the parsha of Kozbi Basur and Zermi Ben Solo, Habayel Aramis Kanon Poikenboy. Then when one is Mbayel, a Goyish woman, then a Kanoi that's there at that time is able to be Paigaya and kill this person. So we see that there's Halacha l'Moshe Misinai that this is Aser. So the Gemara says, so what we must say, the Gzeira of Bnei Sayin that Chachamim added was the Iraise B'farhesya. This that we just mentioned from the story by Pinchas, so that was because it was publicly. And there, because of when it happens publicly, then Kanon Paikin by. Like what happened there. Vaso Inu, the Chachamim came and Gazer, they decreed that even if it's in private, that it's also Aser. But how could you say that this is something that they were geyser in the Yudches Dovar, the Talmidim of Hilm V'Shamai? Even when it's done privately in the Bezdin Chashminoi, they decreed about this. Because Chiyasir Abdimi Yoma, when Abdimi came, he said that Bezdin Shachashminoi Gozru. The Bezdin of the Chashminoim, they decreed that Yisrael Abal Avedes Kechavim, a Yid that has a relation with a Goyish woman, chayiv mishum nashga. There are 4 things that they were geyser that you should be chayiv for. What are the 4 things? So nashga is that they were geyser because of nida. That it's like you had a relation with a woman that's a nida. Even though by Goyim there is no nida, but because if a person will have a relation with a Goyish woman, he may come to have a relation with a nida as well. So they were geyser that she should be tummy like a nida. They were also geyser that it should be also like a shivcha. Like when you marry a shivcha, that it says clearly in the Torah that it's aser. So in order not to come to marry a shivcha, they were geyser that she was like a shivcha. And gimel is a goya. They were geyser the iser of a goya that loyeh vedes kechavim, that you're over on leitischaten, like as if you're marrying a goya. And also the aleph is eishesish. They were geyser that it should be like an eishesish, and even if she's not an eishesish, but they were geyser that in order you shouldn't come to marry an eishesish. So they were geyser that when one has a relation with any guy, it's a gzeira not to come to be over on these 4 things. Nashga. And Kiyasa Ravin came and he said one thing is different. Mishom Nashgaz. They were geyser, Nashgaz. The first 3 is the same. The Zayin is Zaina. That by a Kayan, if he has a relation with someone which is Aser, and then she's categorized as a Zaina, then the Kayan becomes a Chalal. So they were geyser that for a Goyish woman, it should be like a Zaina. So we see that already in the times of the Chashmonaim, they made this gzeira to this extent with all these Yisurim. So the Gemara says, "No ki gazro beis din shel Chashmonai." By the bezdin of the Chashmonaim, what was the gzeira bia? An actual relation there, znus mamish. Avo yichud loy, but they weren't geyser on yichud, just on seclusion. Then the yichud, there was no gzeira for this. Also inu, when it says here the gzeira of Bnei Sayan, they came and they were geyser afila yichud. They were geyser on yichud with a Goyish woman. In fact, the Gemara Yichud Nami, even regarding Yichud Bezdin Shal David Gosser, where is the source of the Isser of Yichud? So the Gemara says in a few places, this began in the times of the Bezdin of David HaMelech. David Rav Yehuda said, Ba'is Shah, at that time when there was a story with Amnon and Tamar, that because of Yichud, he had a relation with her. So Gosser al Yichud, the Bezdin of David HaMelech was Geyser, the Isser of Yichud. So Hamri, but they said to answer this, Hassam Yichud Bas Yisrael. The Yichud that they were Geyser is the Yichud with a Jewish girl. But the yichud with a Goyish woman, that they were not geyser. And then the Chachamim later came and were geyser. Gazra afila a yichud evedes kechavim. They were geyser also on the yichud of an evedes kechavim. Okay, but the Gemara asks now, how could you say that by David he was geyser on the yichud of a Jewish woman? And then later they added a yichud of a Goyish woman. Yichud of As Yisrael. The yichud to be secluded with a Yiddish woman, I see. That's actually a Simanat Torah. Where do you see this? Remez yichud minat Torah minayin. Where is there a hint in the pasuk for the Isser of yichud minat Torah? So now the pasuk says, Ki yisischa achicha ben imecha, that your brother, which is a son from the same mother, you share the same mother, he may come and persuade you to serve Avoda Zara. That's what the pasuk is saying. So the diak here is v'chi ben ein mesis ben av ein mesis. Only a brother that shares the same mother, that's one that may persuade you to serve Avoda Zara, but not one that shares the same father. Ella, what the pasuk is telling you here is ben misyachid emimai. A son may be secluded with a mother. There is no yichud with a mother. But ve'ein acher misyachid imkol arayah shebetayra. But otherwise, any other erva that there is in Torah, there's an isser of yichud. So therefore we see that the Isser of Yichud is hinted here in this pasuk, and even though the Gemara uses the lashon of Remez, but as you see here from the Gemara, it means that there's a real source here for the Isser of Yichud Minat Torah. So if so, you can't say that David HaMelech was the one that was geyser on the Isser of Yichud by Bnei Yisrael. So the Gemara says, no, Yichud Dairaisa, the Isser of Yichud Minat Torah is the Eishes Ish. That's only if the woman is an Eishes Ish. David v'Gazdag. David came and decreed, Afila Ayichud Pnuya. The Isser of Yichud applies even to a single girl. And then also Talmidei Beishama and Beis Hillel, and then later the students of Beishama and Beis Hillel, they came and Gazer Afila Ayichud Oivedes Kechavim. And they added the decree of Bnei Sayem that even on a non-Jewish girl there should be an Isser as well. So this is the conclusion of what the Gzeira of Bnei Sayem was according to this opinion, which was the way Geniva explained it according to Rav. Now the Gemara explains another detail that was mentioned before. Mai al davar acher mishum davar acher. It said a very funny lashon. It says that there's another thing that we're geyser for some other matter. What is this? Rav Nachman Yitzchak says gazru al tinik oive kechavim. They made a gzeira regarding a goyish child. She yitame beziva, that he should be tame like a zav. So again, even though by a guy there is no tumah of ziva at all, but they were geyser this tumah of ziva. So like this, a Jewish child will not play with a friend with a Goyish child. So that a Jewish child should not be together with this non-Jewish child b'mishkav zachar, because this is the concern of mishkav zachar, of inappropriate relation between them. Now Rab Zayda said about this, Tsar Gadol Hayali, that I had a big pain regarding this, meaning he worked very hard to figure this out, exactly at what age they made this Gzeira. It's Rab Asi. He went to Rab Asi to ask about this. And Rab Asi, it's Rab Yechon. Rab Asi inquired by Rab Yechon, and Rab Yechon, it's Rab Yana, and Rab Yana, it's Rabbi Nassan ben Amram, and Rab Nassan ben Amram, it's Rabbi, to inquire from what age this Gzeira is. Tinnik, from what age is a Goyish child going to be Tomei like a Zav, so a Jewish child won't play with him? V'amali, and Rabbi's answer was Ben Yaimai. The Gzeira was from the day he's born, similar to what it said before regarding a non-Jewish girl that Bari Sassam. They were Geyser that she should be like Anida. Now, when I came to Rab Chia, Amali, he said to me, Ben Tes Shana v'Yom Echad. Rab Chia said that the Gzeira is only for a non-Jewish child from when he's 9 years old. Now, so then he went back, Rab Zayda went back, or who? No, it wasn't Rab Zayda, I didn't think he saw Rebbe, but whoever it was that he went back to Rebbe and he said to him what Rab Chia said. Rab Chia said it's only from 9 years old, not from the day he's born. Amali, so Rebbe agreed. Rebbe said, Hanach Dvarai, leave my opinion, ve'echa is divrei Rab Chia, and accept what Rab Chia said, that it's only from 9 years old. Only from 9 years old. Why? Because it's from that age that he's able to have a relation, that there's able to be bia, and therefore it's from then that they were geyser that there should be a tumah of ziva, so that a Yiddish child should not play with him, but not younger than that age. Okay, now the Gemara just has finished the Indian over here. The Gemara says, Ravina said, Hilkach ha tinaikis avedas kechavim, by a Goyish child, a girl, bas gimel shana v'yei from the age of 3 years old, they were geyser on her this tumah as well. Hoyel uruya lebia, since it's from that age that she's roi to have relations. By a girl that's younger, from the age of 3. So therefore, metavanami beziva. So therefore, it's from then that they were geyser the tumah of ziva. Before the Gemara said marisisayan, marisaisan. Over here it's saying from the age of 3. So the Gemara says pshita. It's obvious it's from the age of 3. If you go by what age you roi lebia, so by a boy it's 9, and by a girl it's 3. As we know, always by a girl it's younger, it's from the age of 3. So the Gemara says no, this is a chiddush, because ma'ad tema. Otherwise, I would say hi yodilar guli. It's not only about being roi lebia. It's from a certain age of maturity, from the age of 9 years old. This is a child that is going to go and do such kind of things. He's able to get a Jewish child to do an aveda with him. But v'haila yodilar guli. A girl, even if from the age of 3 she's roi lebia physically, but she's not yet mature enough that she would cause any Jewish boy to do an aveda with her. Kamash Malan, and therefore Ravina comes and says that nevertheless they were guys on a Jewish and a non-Jewish girl even from the age of 3 years old.